he really wants you to feel what he's feeling. And almost when I was listening to it, I felt like it was almost like my, I don't know, like inner monologue kind of like screaming out with him, you know? Hi guys, welcome back, and hello if you are new. Thank you so much for tuning in to my channel. This week I'm going to be talking about a band that have been making waves, no pun intended, in the scene. And I'm of course talking about Urne on their new album, A Feast on Sorrow. So sonically, Urne are kind of like a tricky band to categorize. There's a bit of black metal in there, there's some progressive metal in there, there's some doom, there's some kind of like straightforward groove. But, you know, I think it would be almost like a bit derivative of, you know, the band's identity, I think, to just kind of like pigeonhole them into those genres, because they bring them all together in their own very unique way. Whereas the first album was kind of more of a happier affair. It felt like it was a bit more like, you know, lads having fun. A Feast on Sorrow is anything but. Like, this album is just, it's brutal. You know, from an emotional standpoint, it is absolutely harrowing. And the album, you know, thematically draws from Joe's own personal experience, who is the singer and the bass player in the band. And I've got a really great chat with him coming up, actually, where we talk about, you know, them going on tour with Gojira, being produced by Joe Duplantier, but also specifically, you know, a lot of the tracks that are on this album and its themes. But the overall sort of idea is that this album looks at, specifically for Joe, dementia and loss as well. But you can kind of apply the principles to a lot of different other sort of topics, I think, as well. The album, I think, is basically Joe trying to understand, you know, the sense in what is essentially senseless. You know, I feel like, especially when it comes to, you know, illnesses, it just happens to people. And, you know, that there is that sense of like, what, why? Well, you know, Joe's kind of like hand-picked words which are, you know, fiercely relatable, but also very open and honest. And, you know, it, like I said, it's the choice of his words. So to die twice, you know, the lyrics are, what will die first? The heart, the mind, the soul. And it's just so kind of like dead on. You know, I've had personal experience with people having dementia. My granddad had Alzheimer's, you know, and it is literally like you're losing that person before they've technically gone. In this moment, there will be struggle, our hearts will never be the same, that kind of, you know, it's that moment where everything changes, which is why I really liked the album artwork as well, because again, it's very powerful, it's very strong, black and white, and totally kind of like, you know, you're gone and that's it. And then you have to live with that. But, you know, you have to understand the words, and that's, I think, why his delivery is also very important. Like, he really wants you to feel what he's feeling. And almost when I was listening to it, I felt like it was almost like my sort of inner, I don't know, like inner monologue kind of like screaming out with him, you know? And I really, really like A Feast on Sorrow, because it kind of, I feel like, personifies this idea of sorrow as something that just feeds off of people. And I think really importantly, the word feast, you know, it's really unrelenting. It doesn't give a shit if you're feeling down and sad and everything. It's just going to eat more and more and more, and it's greedy, you know, it just wants more, basically. The songwriting on here, like, they've just tightened everything up. There's no filler whatsoever. Everything's really lean. They all feel really connected as well, which I think is important, because there were moments for me on Serpent and Spirit where it just didn't quite feel as cohesive as a listen as kind of like this one. It literally, the first thing you hear is where do the memories go, but like Joe's kind of screaming it out in this sort of like bewildered, kind of panicked sense. And then once we've gone through a hell of a lot of like pretty pretty dark kind of material, we get to Peace, which is the song just before the last one. And he's saying the same words, but in a really different kind of more accepting kind of way. And I feel like in a way, it's almost kind of like you've gone through those stages of trying to figure it out and, you know, not being sure here and there. And you've not made your peace with it, but you're kind of starting to get your head around. But that track, you know, the Long Goodbye, which is the grand finale of the album, and Where Do the Memories Go, like, that is just brilliant. You know, it's kind of piecing together everything we've heard so far in the album to this one epic kind of really rousing final track. But of course, really do kick your ass into shape as well. And there are some really killer riffs. I mean, you know, the two singles, Becoming the Ocean has got some fantastic riffs in there. The Burden, there's some really cool like triplet kind of riffs. But also, I really, really love A Stumble of Words. There's so many different things that are going on there. And there's always a level of technicality, but never sort of like too much. And they keep that groove nice and locked in. Like To Die Twice, for example, I think really kind of highlights the dynamics, and, you know, they wouldn't be able to do this if they weren't as tight. And it kind of, one of the riffs kind of, it sort of goes like, and it's like literally one extra note, but it sort of brings things slightly off kilter. And there are some huge choruses on this album, you know, Becoming the Ocean definitely has got to be up there. But then The Flood Came Rushing In, the first, you know, song on the album, is really, it kind of takes you by surprise, especially with the kind of melodies that they've chosen to put there. It's really interesting. And of course, as you can imagine, the atmosphere on here is very kind of pensive and makes you sort of think a lot. And the end of To Die Twice has this sort of like this bell which kind of moves into this acoustic guitar. And there's also piano on A Feast on Sorrow. And it kind of, you know, it's nice to hear different instruments, you know, just from like kind of straight riffing. At times, they really want to kind of accentuate that atmosphere, which is, I think, where Peace kind of comes in. And it has swirling melodies and, you know, lyrics where they almost feel like thoughts that are kind of moving around your head, or like, you know, the things that you kind of want to reach out to grab, but you can't quite, and you never quite get them. And I have to say, you know, there's not a huge amount of leads on here, but when there are, holy shit, they are absolutely amazing. Angus, you know, hats off. You are such a fucking great guitarist. And as a whole, I think the record has, in terms of production, got a really sense of rawness to it. And that definitely comes through on the drums. Like that snare kind of like just cracks through everything with each hit. And, you know, there's sometimes where it really goes hard. And this is also the first time that Urne with their new drummer. And, you know, he plays his heart out. And there's some really intricate little fills that are and there's also... There's so many good things about this record. There's also like this weird kind of oxymoron of like looseness, but also being incredibly tight as well. With A Feast on Sorrow, Urne have leveled up. They've combined a concept, atmosphere, and I think probably most importantly, a sense of relatability that few bands really can in their entire life cycle of being a band. Honestly, is an absolutely fantastic record, and for that reason I'm going to give this album a 9 out of 10. It is unmissable. Make sure whatever you do, you listen to this record. So thank you ever so much for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed the album review. Let me know what you think in the comments underneath me. There's also my interview with Joe from Urne, which you can check out. I'll put that as a link underneath here. And yeah, thank you so much, and I will see you guys very, very soon for another album review. Take care.